Gather round, travelers, to hear our tale.
A mysterious organization called the Sisters of Sorrow have swept up our three heroes, and it is up to Kara, Saye, and Arnadel to do battle with the forces of evil and financial destitution.
We shall battle with ancient lore.
Take them down with our sharp reflexes.
Hey, did you guys finish the last of the ale?
Venture Maidens is a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition actual play podcast featuring a cast of 4 lifelong gamers.
Kara, not now. We're recording a podcast ad.
Right. I chop it with my axe.
For gold and glory.
We post our episodes every other Sunday. We've got monsters, treasure, role-playing, a cool plot, and some strange NPCs. Find the Venture Maidens podcast today on iTunes or wherever podcasts are free. Until then, venture away.
This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. Today on the show, I am talking with the ladies of Dames and Dragons, a podcast right here on the Don't Split the Podcast Network about comedy at the table. If you haven't listened to their actual play 5e podcast before, I recommend you give it a listen. They are very, very funny and have some great stories going on over there. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we achieve humor at our tables. So, without any further ado, let's get to the conversation with them. All right, now I am with a group of my favorite podcasters. This is really, really exciting. The dames of the Dames and Dragons are here. And that is Kat, Noel, Kaitlin, and Sophia. Welcome so much to Tabletop Babble. It's really exciting to have you here. Why don't we sort of go around the table and you can say who you are and what you do on the show. And we'll start with you, Kat.
Hello, it's me. I'm Kat. I am your DM. Not your DM at this point, but, you know, in all aspects of your life.
Excellent. Well, it's awesome to have you here. I have to say, I do think your players give you a run for your money, and you do an excellent job with it. So,
oh, thank you. I do my best.
And welcome back to Tabletop Babble, Noel. Noel, what do you do on the show Dames and Dragons?
I cause conflict and then try to resolve it. I play a character called Fran, and she is a Genasi wizard. And I also edit this podcast and do all the music.
Excellent. Yeah, and you do a great job. Editing an actual play is no joke. And choosing then to compose your own music for it is like a bridge I would never dare cross. So, yeah, amazing work. Really great stuff.
I'm over here. I'm on the other side of the river Styx.
Yes, you are. I'll just wave to you. We can communicate via flag signals. And Sophia, what do you do on the show?
I'm just a regular dude who talks on the show as a character. I also do some of the art along with my dear pal, Kaitlin.
Yes, Kaitlin. How about you introduce yourself as well? What do you do on Dames and Dragons?
I sleep a lot. But I also play a character named Corbin, who's a human druid, and I very occasionally do some art and once made a Tumblr account.
A dope website, too.
Yeah.
I barely did any work for it, though.
Caitlin is not giving herself enough credit.
No.
She does a lot more than she is saying, but it's all behind the scenes stuff.
So talented.
She's the glue that keeps our internet presence together.
Yep. Barely. I forgot we had a Twitter for like 6 months.
Okay, maybe not that part of our internet presence, but
that's okay.
We built our website.
Okay.
I'm sorry for like the 600 DSPN notifications you probably got when you came back onto your Twitter account.
I didn't have to deal with those.
No, that was then when Noel.
I accept your apology, James.
Well, this is excellent, and we're going to dive in because Dames and Dragons is among some of the funniest podcasts that I listen to, and out there on the internet for people to consume. I dare say it is the funniest actual play podcast. So,
Whoa!
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's high praise. High praise.
Absolutely. So I find myself laughing a lot when I listen to it. Every other Monday when it comes out, or every other Sunday if you are a Patreon supporter. But let's talk a little bit before we dive into comedy and comedy at the table in general. Let's dive into Dames and Dragons and sort of what it is. It's an actual play podcast. Our audience knows that much. You all are the players on the stage. But what is it about? What is the story you all are telling?
Dames and Dragons is... it's about some guys and they go off and they do some stuff.
Wow.
And, yeah. No. So it takes place on the... Oh, James, do I start at the beginning and not spoil it after, or do we?
Yeah. Start at the beginning.
We can speak in very general terms if you'd like, so we don't spoil it for the.
Yeah, we don't spoil that end of Arc 1 twist.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dames and Dragons is an actual play podcast. It takes place on the island of Estra, which is a floating island in the sky that is kept aloft by the goddess. The players take the roles of the goddess's 3 guardians, and they do their best to protect her from the festering evils of the world below. And they don't always do the greatest job of it, but gosh darn, they sure do try.
That's good. I think that's a great description and a sort of great setup. And one of the things about these guardians is that all of the guardians, I feel, are very distinct. And also, I guess I would say sort of young adults would be the best way to put it. It seems to be their age range, right? They're sort of, it's a coming of age tale, if you will.
Yeah, they're all like 16 or 17.
Mm-hmm.
So...
Yeah.
That's like young adult in like Dungeons and Dragons time, I guess.
Right. Yeah, because everybody dies at the age of like 32.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're all middle-aged.
So let's talk a little bit about the formation of each character. So my questions are, first, let's describe each character. And then when you were building your character, did you have the idea in mind that you were creating a character to entertain, or were you just building a Dungeons and Dragons character and thinking the entertainment would follow? And why don't we start with you, Noel?
Yeah, I definitely had that in mind. My co-hosts will tell you that I'm obsessively against anybody telling anybody anything outside of the podcast. And that included when we were in the character creation phase. We didn't really know anything about each other's characters. We just kind of were trusting Kat to tell us if they were too similar or not. And when I was creating my character, Fran, in particular, I was trying to create a character who like would cause conflict, but like in a funny way and not like a frustrating way, hopefully. She's kind of a prickly person, and she's a little bit of a coward and has kind of her own self-interest at heart, but she also has a great capacity for love. And I think when you're trying to create a character that's going to be funny, but not just like a one-note, one-shot character, you do kind of want to have like big conflicting scripts that will cause interesting moments where a character maybe acts in a way that you wouldn't expect, but in a way that ultimately fits.
So you had the show in mind when you were sort of creating your character and are bringing it together. And I like that you have this philosophy of the game is only happening when the game is happening in your recording, because you don't want to sort of ruin things outside of that, which is
right.
That's really interesting. And I guess it also helps you be in the moment and improv things, because you're not sort of planning ahead like, oh, well, I know Sophia is going to do this, so I will do X, Y, and Z when that hapret's.
Right.
Because you don't know what each other's going to do.
Right. And frankly, it's mostly because we all have really bad memories. So pretty much every single thing that we have revealed to each other outside of the podcast, we forgot to put in the podcast. So That's part of it too.
Nice.
We all completely forget pretty much everything that happens on this podcast between the moment we stop recording and the moment that episode is released. No idea. Besides Noel.
It's just like a black hole in our memory space.
So what about you, Kaitlin? When you were forming this, were you thinking about the podcast? Were you thinking about Dungeons and Dragons? What was sort of your approach to character building, and what is your character like?
Well, I was sort of thinking about the podcast. I like, obviously I knew I was creating a character like for a podcast that was going to be a Dungeons and Dragons character. I definitely wasn't thinking that anybody would listen to the podcast. So that was not like, I wasn't building Corbin to be like entertaining necessarily. But outside of podcasting, I do like write, and that is what I like one day might do professionally. So I am like very attentive to like the idea of character building and like building a character that's kind of well-rounded. That being said, I don't think I did that when I came Corbin. I literally, like, that's not to say that I didn't put any thought into it, but like most of what I was trying to do was, I knew that the other dames were creating female characters, and that we kind of wanted this to be like, you know, like a female-based podcast, just because we're all ladies and it's literally called Dames and Dragons. But I did want to have a character who was a dude that I could kind of use to like subvert some of those unfortunate misogynistic tropes that you see so often in mass media. So that's part of what Corbin's like purpose is. But I also want him obviously to be his own character and to be more than just like a tool for me to do that with, basically.
You want him to be more than his boob window.
I want him to be more than his boob window.
Well, Kaitlin, I will say, I think you have done a really good job of having a character that's almost exclusively funny, but like does have a few character moments that feel like they fit. You know, like the part where he like remembers like how he was left in the forest and things like that.
I was almost about to scream spoiler alert at you, but yeah.
That was genuinely very sad.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like, I mean, then that is like something that I want to like explore more about Corbin as time goes on. And I think one of my main tactics for his character is sort of just like letting it develop itself as we progress through the story and kind of just seeing what comes out of him while still trying to maintain like a stable set of characteristics, basically.
Sure. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I love Corbin-centric scenes. They're really excellent. And also was not expecting, speaking of the unexpected, Corbin's introduction is like, oh, I did not expect a character like this to show at all. And I'm so glad one did. I really, really am happy about that. And Kaitlin, what about you? How did you form?
Sophia, you mean?
Oh my gosh, I do. Sorry, I already.
Fine, we are the same person.
We're the same person. We're actually conjoined twins.
We are.
Get close to your mic.
Sophia, and last time Noel was on here, I called her Nicole. So I know that I'm just left and right, who is not a person on your podcast at all.
That we know of.
Yeah.
Right.
That you know of, James.
Right. I mean, I would assume as your best friend that I would know everyone who's on the podcast.
Well, I mean, you know, the secret fifth member is privileged information. So, yeah.
It is. So, Sophia, let's talk about your character. How did you form this person? Like, where did they come from, and who are they?
So I play Laika, and I think in forming her character, I didn't do as much background preparation until we started the podcast. And I think through our interactions, like her character, and I think all our characters formed, like once we started to build those relationships. I will say, like, I don't think I thought about comedy as much as I did, like, just think about what it was like to be a teen with a lot of responsibility, because that was Kat's setup for us. I think we were even maybe going to be younger, or the goddess was going to be younger.
Yeah, the goddess was going to be younger, but that didn't end up working out just timeline-wise, so I did end up aging her up to be your guys' age. But I think from the beginning, you guys were, I said like 16, 17.
Yeah, which I just think it's so interesting that that's like a common trope, is that you're this teen saddled with like the responsibility of saving the world, when like my memories of being a teen, it's a lot more awkward than that. So I feel like that's a lot of my inspiration for Laika.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of like our characters too, and I think particularly me and Sophia feel this in terms of playing a character on a comedy podcast, is we kind of do sometimes feel the need to kind of play the straight man. Mm-hmm. Because if it's just all jokes all the time, then it kind of loses its soul. Mm-hmm. And we really want to let like Caitlin's character shine too. Yeah. No, for real. Caitlin, don't laugh.
I have no ability to be the straight man. I don't have that talent.
So that's really interesting. And I think this theme of teens is relatable in both that it is a funny thing, but it is also an extremely relatable thing. Most people who listen to your podcast, I will assume, were teenagers at some point, or probably are teenagers as they're listening to it. And so it allows you to, even though it's a fantasy world and there's, sky islands and other such fantastic things, it allows you to really draw on these experiences that you've hinted at, right? That are awkward, that are part of being a teen and growing up, and everything from sort of just thinking that you can do it all, right? Thinking that you don't need help and are amazing and can do it, to young, awkward flirting and romance and sort of everything in between. And with then coupled with like, hey, by the way, the fate of the world is on your shoulders because you have to protect this goddess. So I think that's really interesting. So Kat, when you were sort of creating the base story and the world for this, were you thinking like, well, if they're all teenagers, this will be hilarious? Or was this just a story that spoke to you and you thought the entertainment value will come from it?
Yes to both. My background, I have a degree in creative writing, and I focused on writing young adult fiction. So having all the characters as teens was just very much in my wheelhouse. That's what I enjoy writing. I like writing about kids having adventures. I think it's fun for all ages. I won't say it was like what I was thinking at the time, but looking back, it's definitely just because that's really what I'm very comfortable writing.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And you're also then comfortable improvising in that world as well, right? If that's where you're comfortable writing, it's a world and it means you're more comfortable sort of improvising and making things up. I find that when I run a game too, that I also like to pick something I'm familiar with, pick themes that I am familiar with, and go from there. Like, for instance, I don't really tackle fatherhood or like being a parent at all, because it's not something I'm familiar with.
Kat, you also told us at some point that you were pretty surprised that we were all playing so silly when we started. I mean, surprised and happy about it. Because, I mean, as far as humor goes, like, the world is pretty serious. Most of the things that are happening are pretty serious. There are, like the goddess has some really funny moments. And, like, there's characters like Dashing Dawson that are hilarious. But, like, overall, and I feel like that's, again, goes back to, like, it's kind of the soul of the podcast, and then with jokes spread over the surface.
Yeah, it's it's the bread of our podcast sandwich.
Yeah.
And you guys are all the jokes that are like the lettuce and the meats. I don't know why I went to this. This is maybe not the best metaphor, but
lettuce, meat, and bread is all you need.
So that's a great point too, right? Is I think some people, when they set out to make a comedy podcast, might be like, well, you're in the land of, weird cheeses and you're all cheese people, and lean hard into the comedy aspect as opposed to telling a story that is relatable and just knowing that the jokes will come, which seems very improv based. When you do improv, you're taught, like, don't try to be funny, try to get to truths, try to be natural, and the humor will come from that, right? And it does feel like you all are doing a lot of that. So how much pressure do you all feel to be funny? And we should also talk about sort of how much Dungeons and Dragons experience did you all have before you started the podcast?
So those are two separate questions. We'll start with the second one first.
Yes.
None.
Thank you.
Almost none. Almost none experience.
We had some.
Almost none.
Cat, we had played at least 7 times before in one campaign.
Kat and I played in high school together too, and we have some fond memories over our high school DM.
Oh yeah. Oh, he was a character. No, so yeah, we have some, but very minimal, and I think that may lend to our humor. Is that we don't really care that much about the rules of Dungeons and Dragons, and I care much more about if they want to do something and it's funny or it's cool, and the rules don't allow it, then I don't care about the rules. I want to have them do something funny or cool.
Rule of cool.
The rule of cool.
Well, oftentimes the rules of D&D do make things more interesting because they're they're imposing limits on you, and then you have to think of an interesting way or a more creative way to do something, or sometimes a funnier way because it's very stupid. But I think you've made some good calls on the times when not to follow the rules too.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes some good calls on when to follow the rules to allow us from becoming insane, hungry demons.
Well, and that's good. I think finding that balance. That's one of the hardest parts of GMing, I think, is knowing when to throw out the rules and when not to. And I have to say, your episode 0, where you sort of introduce your audience to the rules of D&D if they're not familiar, is great. And it should be given to new players so they can understand how to play as well. Really, really love that. And also sort of sets a nice tone for what you're going to be getting in the podcast as well. It's just a really fun listen. Hey everybody, James Introcaso here. Just wanted to take a quick second to talk to you about one of our sponsors, Lone Wolf Development, the makers of Hero Lab. What is Hero Lab? Well, Hero Lab is a pretty awesome character creation tool that makes everything a breeze. You can automatically track modifiers for every single stat, ability, item, spell, and option you select with Hero Lab. Who's it for? Well, it's for people who play 5th edition, 4th edition, Pathfinder, Shadowrun, Mutants Masterminds, Call of Cthulhu, Savage Worlds, and so much more. You can use Hero Lab to print or save to PDF, or even import your characters directly to D20 Pro or Fantasy Grounds. The authoring kit allows you to create amazing new options such as armor, classes, feats, races, spells, and you can even create your own game systems. There's an amazing community that's making all kinds of stuff that you can be uploading all the time. Or maybe you're more of a traditionalist. Maybe you want more of a realistic approach. Well, guess what? The validation engine lets you check to make sure that your characters are totally 100% game legal. That's right. So if you're playing an organized play, this is an amazing tool to have. Check it out at getherolab.com. That's getherolab.com, and tell them DSPN sent you. All right, back to the show. So let's talk a little bit then, and why don't I start with you this time, Sophia, about when you are playing. What do you do to be funny? Which I know is a hard question. It's like it's almost like asking you to be funny on command. I guess the question is, are you in a mindset? All 4 of you are obviously very sort of naturally humorous people. We're having a lot of fun right now. You can tell because I stated it, and that's how you always know.
We're all having a good time.
Yeah, exactly.
The
But
most
so
fun
like,
I've ever had.
what do you think, Sophia? Are you in your brain about it too much? And I'm sorry to do this to you right before you record a session. I don't mean to get into your head.
That's totally fine. I don't think any of us consciously make the decision of we are going to plan jokes ahead of time. I know for Noel, she's sometimes set up things, I think, that we then all kind of fall into. She'll make little joke traps that we all go along with. But I think it all comes up naturally while we're recording. We all have, a good relationship. We all really enjoy making each other laugh. So when we're not recording, we're always trying to make each other crack up, basically. And I think we'll do really stupid, goofy things to make sure that happens. And the one thing I think I do try and be conscious of is like the theme of a scene. Like, is it a more serious scene? Is it a more comedic scene? Like, what's the overall mood? And then I think we like sort of all either play up or play down our jokes based on that. But I think it really depends on the moment and how we're all interacting with each other.
Reading the room. Yes, I do think that's really important. And I love that because it feels like then you're not stepping on other people's moments just because you feel the need to make a joke every 5 seconds or 15 minutes or whatever it is, which I think is really good. What about you, Kaitlin? There were some jokes thrown around about how you can't be serious. Is that how you are in real life? Are you more of a jokester, as it were?
Nodding, Noel.
We're all just sitting here silently nodding along with you, James. Yes, absolutely. That's exactly Kaitlin.
Yeah, so I do have trouble being serious. It is a coping mechanism. But also, I, like, with Corbin specifically, I think, like, almost, I'm going to say the opposite of what Sophia said in some respects, which is that I feel like Corbin's, like, main thing that I try to do, which is subconscious in some ways, because I also do this in real life, is completely ignore the mood and say something incredibly inappropriate.
Yeah.
That being said, I think that there's obviously like a limit to that. Like if we have a character who's like in extreme emotional like distress and something really grave has just happened, like I don't think I would make an inappropriate joke at that time.
Yeah, that's when Fran steps in.
That's when Fran steps in. Yeah, usually like Corbin will pass the buck off to her and she'll kind of take care of it.
Though Corbin is very endearing when he doesn't understand a mood, but he's still trying so hard.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, so I don't know, like, but I also do agree with what Sophia said, which is that, like, I think a lot of our humor just comes from, like, trying to make each other laugh. And I think with me in particular, I have a very bad brain to mouth filter. And so for me, a lot of the struggle is, like, not constantly saying every horrible joke that comes to mind. Because there was an episode that came out, I think it was the most recent episode that I had to re-listen to because, as we said, we forget everything after we record it. And there's a part where I like specifically try to come up with a joke and it doesn't work. So like, I absolutely am not able to think of jokes ahead of time. It has to be immediately in the moment.
That part was great though.
Thanks. I didn't think so.
I loved it.
But also 90% of the time it's unintentional.
Noel, we talked a little bit about this actually in our improv episode. So, you know, I know you don't have as much of a prepared approach, although it does sound like maybe you have some things prepared.
I have the most prepared approach among these players, I would say.
And it's a low bar. Is that what I'm hearing too?
Well, not really. I feel like it's a normal amount. I don't know.
No, that's fair. The normal amount is low.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you do? How does this? How do the things you've prepared? How do those sort of come to be?
Well, I mean, what I will say is like being funny. Like, there's really like one secret to it, I would say, and it is that you have to like constantly think about it from the time you're born, how to make other people laugh and never stop and become obsessed.
And also all of your self-worth is based on being able to make people laugh.
Exactly.
Yes.
So if you stop making people laugh, you spiral downwards into depression.
Oh, wow.
So that's really
dark.
the secret.
That's real though.
So you're saying if you haven't started since birth, give up, is what you're saying.
I'm saying it'll take you 25 years to get where I'm at.
Got it. Well, that's okay. So first of all, you're saying you're 25, which is a knife to the heart for us old folks here who haven't started, because I don't know, that's more than my life right now. So
25 in human years. Don't worry about it.
I'll prep things like kind of a shtick. And I've done this for like when I've been on DSPN Presents too. Have like one kind of anchor, sometimes a funny thing, maybe sometimes not funny. even if it's meaning to be. But I'll have one thing that I can keep going back to in a moment where I'm like, oh God, what should I do? What should I say? What's going to be funny? And one of my things for Fran is like the roll to fall in love thing. Like I prepared that in advance and I was like, I think this will be a funny recurring joke as long as I don't do it too many times. So, I mean, there is like a certain amount of prep that I do that I think works. And I think, but like Kaitlin and Sophie said too, like you can't rely on that all the time. And really in the end, you kind of have to just like let it flow. And also sometimes like letting go of the thing you prepared or like the joke you already made and that keeps coming back and like finally just being like, no, it's dead now. We must bury it.
Or forcing it out like I do and having an awkward moment of silence before. We all just have to accept it.
Yeah. Everyone accepting it, that's part of the equation.
Yeah.
I mean, but for real it is because there's like, you know what it's like when you're in one of those groups where like, it's like maybe people you haven't met and like you make a joke and they just are like, okay.
I do.
Like,
yes.
Yeah. But like, even if it's not funny, it's like, dude, like at least pretend to laugh or tell me I'm like, you make it funny that it wasn't funny. Like, don't just be like, oh, let's move on.
Well, I think so that's interesting because I do think there are people who when a joke falls flat, they're not sure what to do, especially if you're at a group with like people who've never played before or who are strangers might think like, well, I don't want to offend this person. Like, I don't want to make another joke that could be mean. But I also didn't think this was funny, so I didn't laugh. You know, what is for people who are maybe less comfortable with humor at the table or who are more serious in their game style that they're used to and they want to, you know, liven things up and have a little bit more humor at the table. What are some good things folks can sort of do to make a looser, safer, more trusting atmosphere so that you do feel comfortable then when a joke falls flat, being like, that fell flat, and I am going to point it out in a way that is really funny. How do we create the atmosphere? Because it sounds like a lot of what you're saying is you're trying to make each other laugh. You rely on each other and each other's social cues to know when it's appropriate to make a joke and when it's not appropriate to make a joke. So it sounds like you all have this great base of trust that probably comes from being friends well before you ever decided to make a D&D podcast together. How, like, is it possible to form trust and humor quickly with a group of new players?
Okay, they're all shaking their head at me, but I will say yes. I think it is. So one of the things I did before I began doing a D&D podcast is I taught improv to teenagers. So one of the things that we would do with the kids, like whenever we had a new camp, because the killer of improv and the killer of comedy is being embarrassed. One of the things that we would do is we'd sit around with the kids and we'd say, okay, make your dumbest faces. Just sit there and make stupid faces and make stupid noises and just go for it. Because once you are able to let go of being embarrassed when a joke doesn't land or being embarrassed for someone else when their joke doesn't land, once you can let that go, everything gets a lot more fun.
Nice. I like that a lot. And I think that's very true, right? And I think maybe as the dungeon master of a group of strangers, you might be able to set that in motion. Does that sound right? Like, yeah. You know, if the DM sets the tone, there's a trickle down effect to the players. Not the DMs are above players, but we totally are. So
we totally are. All right, Kaitlin also has a good answer for this.
I have a great answer for this, actually. But what Kat said is very, very true. Sorry, Sophia, I'm going to throw you under the bus right now. So sometimes Sophia will say really stupid
Yes.
I want to just say this is true. Thanks. Yeah, and nobody ever acknowledges it. And I just intuitively will say exactly what she said. And everybody will laugh afterwards. Because it's like, oh yeah, Sophia did just say that insane thing. But we just kind of blocked it out. And then it becomes funny. So I think if you are the person who is in a group of people and somebody else makes a joke that falls flat, just literally just repeat the joke. And then everybody will be like, oh my God, yeah. And that way, it's not necessarily, you're not being mean. You're being like, hey.
Well, and I think you need to do it from a place of kindness.
Yeah. Oh,
like, there's like a way to be like, oh, you said this.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is you kind of have to deal with like your own insecurity too and be like, I'm accepting and loving this person, and I'm saying this in a way that's trying to make them feel as part of the group and not being like, I should distance myself from them because they like made a bad joke. And, you know, especially like in a group of people that you don't know. You were saying like about like being offensive. And I think like that's a little bit different than a joke falling flat, in my opinion. I mean, definitely those jokes will fall flat.
Sure.
In most groups.
Like those are jokes that shouldn't be salvaged.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
Yeah. Maybe don't salvage it. If you're not, you know, for whatever reason in that moment wanting to confront it. I mean, I think there's ways to be like, oh man, like, let's leave that out of the room. You know, even if you do it in kind of a cheesy way that can, you know, mitigate atmosphere damage, you know?
Sure. Yes. Yeah. Totally.
But I think also like if you really like just change the subject as soon as possible and then talk to that person later, unless you really get the feeling that they know what they said was offensive and regret it, which sometimes everybody does that once in a while. But that depends on how well you know them too.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I meant offensive, I meant you didn't want to insult a person whose joke had fallen flat so that they would take offense. Not necessarily, like, let's be clear.
But even in that case, like, I mean, I don't necessarily only mean like socially offensive. I do mean like if you like insulted somebody too.
I think to some degree too, it definitely depends on the person who's making the joke, because there are like those people out there who can be really funny, but then like sometimes if their joke does fall flat, like they can't handle it. Like no matter what you do, they're gonna like just be ruined for the rest of the time. And it's unfortunate, but I think in those situations it's just kind of like, well, I can't help you.
You just have to pile them with love. Insert love into every equation. Love is the funniest thing there is.
Yeah, love is stupid.
Well, and I think I think, you know, leading with friendship and leading with kindness is a great way to go. Even when someone does something that falls flat, if you're able to, I love that, just repeat exactly what they said, can be a great way to do it. And it can even make that person feel like, my joke did play off. It was just, you know, like I set you up, you knocked it down. It was great. We did it.
Although I would say to be careful when you repeat what they say, because if it turns into a situation where they're like, you're a joke stealer, that's bad.
Yeah. You don't want to be a joke thief. Give credit. You know, make sure you're attributing credit. And also, I would also say, like, you don't necessarily want to mock that person like in a mocking tone, like like when couples imitate their significant others with a dumb dude or dumb girl voice. You don't want to do that kind of thing. But just repeating what they say is amazing. I love that so much. So let's talk a little bit, Kat, right now, just me and you, DM to DM. Let's talk a little bit about when the humor gets out of control. How do you get your players back on track?
Well, I have two tactics. The first one is silence. And just let them get it out. Mm-hmm. Just let them go for a little while. And if that doesn't work and then they don't stop, that's the point where you just keep talking over them and saying, guys, hey guys, for as long as it takes for them to stop talking. And usually when people sort of get on that kind of a roll and they get out of hand, it's fun. So you don't want to squash it because, let's be real, whatever description of mountains that I have written down is really not as much fun as the jokes around the table and just hanging out with your friends. But at the same time, we're all people who have busy lives and you want to keep things moving and make sure that, you know, we have accomplished something by the end of the session. So always let people have fun, because even though we as DMs, James, we are better than everybody else.
Of course.
We as DMs would just be talking to empty tables if we didn't have players.
Exactly. Yes. We need the players. As much as they need us and our wisdom and guidance.
It's like a sandwich. We can't just have a bread sandwich. That's just toast.
That's true. Although toast is delicious and fun.
And books are good to read.
So,
James, by the way, this conversation has officially downgraded you from my favorite person spot. Rudy is now my favorite person.
That's okay.
Rudy's back.
More deserving. He is more deserving. He's my favorite person too. So let's talk a little bit then about why D&D, why role-playing games in general, why choose to make a role-playing game comedy podcast as opposed to something else. You know, I know we have a couple writers in this group. I know we've got artists in this group. Why would you choose this instead of something scripted or everybody workshopping their stand-up comedy? What was it about this in particular that spoke to you for comedy? Maybe we should start with whose idea was the podcast?
Kat.
It was me. I remember it vividly. We were sitting at Kaitlin's kitchen table.
Yeah. It was my birthday.
Yeah, it was Caitlin's birthday. And I forget what we were saying, but we were talking about the Adventure Zone, and we were like, we could do that. We're that funny. We're funny enough to do that.
I think we were also thinking like, well, because people in our D&D group didn't really want to meet up very often.
Yeah.
And we were saying, oh, well, we should just start another group then, like just us. And then Kat was like, hey.
All I remember is that I was like in another room talking to other people, and then I walked into the kitchen where all three of you were like sitting around my kitchen table.
Sophie was not there.
Whatever.
Yeah,
I think Sophie was there.
Sophie was there.
I was there.
You have to tell her about it later. It's fine.
What?
No, I was
Wrong.
there.
All right, it's fine.
Fight. I swear to God.
All right.
I think you maybe walked into the conversation later, but continue.
Anyways, I came into the kitchen, and at least 2 and possibly 3 people just turned to me simultaneously and were like, do you want to be in a live what do we do?
An actual play.
Thank you. I keep wanting to say live action. Do you want to be in an actual play D&D podcast with us? And I said, duh.
Yeah.
Something to that effect.
So, okay, so what is it about? Why D&D? Why was so that sounds like maybe the choice was because you all wanted to play D&D more often and you knew that a podcast would sort of give you the reason to do that.
Yeah, basically.
I also think like D&D is and role-playing games in general, like there's such a natural basis for humor. I think you can put like 4 of the most unfunny people in the world and, you know, give them some pre-written campaign that was not well written or something, you know, and they can still, it will result in jokes and humor. And I think part of that is just because like the basis of so much comedy is, like I was saying earlier, like conflicting scripts. So one thing combined with something else that you wouldn't expect. And just by nature of the fact that we are playing as people in like olden fantasy times, but we are not from olden fantasy times, results in a lot of jokes. And I think if you listen to a lot of actual plays, like a lot of their jokes are based around that. And some of our jokes are too, are like inserting modern culture into this fantasy culture and how like that just naturally results in comedy.
Yeah, I think, and my fellow DM and new best friend, Kat, can probably back me up on this, but I think in improv, a lot of times they'll say things like, if you're going to have a weird setup, then you should be doing something normal. So like if everybody is an alien family from Mars, they should be sitting at a table having dinner like a normal human family, and the humor will come from the fact that they're aliens, right? And that if the situation is normal, that's when something weird has to happen action-wise. And so I do think that sort of the idea that you can inject some modern culture into what is essentially medieval fantasy, right, really resonates well. And I think you all do that very well. You certainly have some very fun moments come from that. So let's real quick, we're coming close to the end of our time here. But before we go, one thing I want to do is sort of go around the table and just talk about some of your favorite jokes that you have told, which I know, again, it's putting you on the spot. Is anybody prepared to talk about a favorite joke? It doesn't have to be the best joke or your most favorite. And if it's going to spoil plot, we can always say like, oh, we would have told this other one, but it would have spoiled the plot. So
does it have to be a joke that we personally have made?
No,
Okay.
not at all. It can be. In fact, I encourage you to all pick jokes that Kaitlin has made. Clearly, what she needs.
I have one to start, and that is the entire sequence of the party on Estra, which I don't know if that counts as a joke or a bit, but that's, getting down into the etymology of... Entomology is the one where they study bugs.
That's
Etymology?
Etymology,
Yeah.
thank you.
You're welcome.
So not getting into the etymology of jokes, but that came out of left field for me. I did not have any setup where I thought that it would lead to throw a rager and get a fall orc boy to play at your party. That whole thing was just delightful.
Can I do one that's from our old campaign?
Sure. Anything at the table is great. That's
Okay,
awesome.
there were so many good parts in that old campaign, but I think one of my lasting favorite visual images was Noel previously played a tiefling, and there was a part where Kat had us going through like this bog with kind of like Follow My or Dragon Age style, like zombies coming out of the water. And we cut the hands or the arms off of one of them and stuck them on top of the horns of Noel's tiefling character. And it was very grotesque. And I think at one point they also like were holding candles.
Oh yeah, they held
something?
candles. They did peace signs. They had
they
thumbs
did all
up.
of it. That was my favorite.
I think middle fingers as well.
Yes, definitely.
Nice. That's awesome.
Good one.
I forgot about that.
I never
I
forget.
blocked that out of my memory.
My favorite joke from our old campaign was that my character's name was Mordai because he made more people die.
That's
Got
your
it.
joke.
You can pick your joke too. There's nothing wrong with being proud of your work.
Yeah,
That's
I
great.
can pick my jokes and you can also pick my jokes. It's fine.
One of my favorite parts was Kat is a really funny person, and
Thank you.
oftentimes her more goofy moments get cut in editing just because if Kat's making jokes, it usually means we're all off track.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
whenever Kat like introduces a new character with a crazy voice is a wonderful moment for me, and I encourage her to keep having really crazy voices all the time. But I really loved her introduction with Fran's parents and her dear parents.
Oh
Yeah. They serve the role of her parents and
Yeah.
her being like really annoyed with them, and especially the mom Kosu. I think she had some really great moments.
Fran, how could you do this to me?
You're dead now, Mom. Go back to the grave.
Spoilers,
Wait, that's
spoilers,
a spoiler.
Spoilers.
Yeah, cut that out, James.
Yeah, she might not be dead.
That's true. We don't know.
So let's, can we talk a little bit about editing real fast, Noel? Because,
Oh, yeah.
I do podcasts as well, and I work in...
Wait, what?
I know, it's crazy. It's crazy. This whole thing has been recorded this entire time.
Calling the police.
But I also work in television, film, and video for my day job, and I make promos that sometimes are supposed to be funny. And so I know that editing is like a big part of making humor work, and timing obviously is a big part of making humor work. So when you are playing, are you in the mode of like, all right, well, this is getting cut later, and almost
Yes.
making notes to yourself? You are definitely.
Absolutely.
And she
yeah.
announces it to all of us the entire time.
Yes.
I don't do it that often, but or I'll say I cut a lot more than I announce. Yeah, I do get into that mode. I try not to be in it too much because I think it like makes me go silent with like,
Dread.
flying thoughts.
Right.
But
right.
I mean, as far as editing out like joking parts in our podcast goes, if they are made in character and like they're not breaking the fourth wall in some way that seems really heinous, I leave them in. Because I think that just adds to the podcast. It contributes so much to the flow. Usually things that get cut are like, kind of like Sophia was saying, like if we're really off track. Or if it's like in the middle of a serious scene, like Caitlin's been saying, which and I'm not targeting her in specific. No. We all four do that in a serious scene where we're like, oh my God, like, how do we deal with this emotions from the real life, you know? And so like every serious scene that you've ever heard on Dames and Dragons, few and far between that they are, there's like at least as much time of like all four of us being like, oh, like I wipe her tears with a toilet paper that I pulled out of my own butt. Like
That is true.
Which is really funny and I really enjoy it, but partially just because I add music in the background, I don't add those parts in. And if you want to hear those parts, please donate to our Patreon. For only $1 a month, all this can be yours.
Do you ever tighten up a joke? You know, like make someone sound more eloquent than they did, or tighten up the timing between like two phrases or something to make a joke work better?
Yes. Mainly, I will say I mainly do that for myself, and I have even re-recorded jokes that were not in the podcast. And everyone else has amnesia, so they don't know.
Big reveals happening here.
Yeah, this is a scandalo, but yeah, I definitely do that. But for the most part, I would say like a lot of the strongest jokes, they're parts that are very sparsely edited, because I think like our group really does have a natural rapport with each other. So I think also like a lot of our strongest jokes come at parts where there's no possible way I could edit it because we're all talking at once, but like, or not at once, but like kind of a little bit over each other, the beginnings and endings of phrases. So like, and in a way that really works.
Honestly, that makes sense. And what you said about editing yourself the most, I think I do that too on this podcast. I remove the most uhs and ums and phrases from myself more than I ever do it for the guests, because I am vain.
Of
course. I will say I never go back and add jokes, but that's pretty
okay.
Cool.
Well, you know what? Like some people, I guess, are just better than me. Like that's fine, James.
Well, I'm not a joke-heavy podcast. I think if I was, we would. I do know that a one Mr. Rudy Basso. For Have Spellbook all the time is tweaking stuff in the edit, and it's a very heavily edited podcast, and sometimes new characters voiced by Rudy will show up in the final edit, and it's like, we just need somebody to make this scene work, so I thought I'd throw down a few lines and yada yada.
That's a great impression.
Yeah, he sounds like a lumberjack in real life. We're always pitching his voice up on podcasts.
Oh my God.
Well, this has been an awesome conversation. I do hope you will all come back and chat with me again. I'd love to chat with you all about story structure and creating characters and things like that if you're all down.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having us.
Excellent. Sure. Thank you for coming on. Before we go, where can people find you on the internet? What is a great way? Obviously, don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com. They can read all about Dames and Dragons there, but where are some other good places for them to find you?
Well, you can find links to just about everything on damesanddragons.com. We're Dames and Dragons on Tumblr, on Facebook, and we're Dragon Dames on Twitter. And if you tweet at Dames and Dragons, like, I'm sorry, but they will not respond. We've tried it.
Is there someone else has at Dames and Dragons on Twitter?
Yeah.
It's another podcast that I don't think has released an episode since 2012.
Yeah.
We've tried so hard, James. We want that Twitter handle so bad.
Well, let me see. Perhaps the DSPN administrative offices can help you with that one. We'll see.
Oh my God.
I knew we joined this network for a reason.
That's right. It's the only thing we've ever done, but we'll see. And it's also in the future and has not been done yet. But well, thank you so much for joining me today on Tabletop Babble.
Thank you for having us.
Well, you can see why we invited the ladies of Dames and Dragons to join the Don't Split the Podcast Network. They are amazing role players and storytellers who we're super proud to have here. And you know what? If you like them, maybe you should check out DSPN Presents, because you can hear more of them chatting it up with cool people. Sometimes Rudy Basso, sometimes myself, sometimes people on the Venture Maidens. It is amazing. We showcase different RPGs, we have different actual plays, we have different personalities from the network on, and hey, we're also throwing in occasional panels and advice episodes and things like that. So check out DSPN Presents. You know, Tabletop Babble is still a new show, and we could use your help growing and getting the word out about this podcast. How do you do that? Well, it's simple. You go to iTunes, you leave us a 5-star review. iTunes recommends us to other people. Even if you don't use iTunes, a lot of podcatcher apps use the iTunes algorithms to recommend podcasts to new people. So, even if you don't have an iTunes account, go make one. It's free. Go give us a rating. Go give Dames and Dragons a rating. Go give DSPN Presents a rating. Go give Venture Maidens a Game O'Clock, DM's Deep Dive. Go give them all great ratings. And then go give all your other podcasts great ratings too and help other people find them. And to help encourage you to do just that, I am reading aloud one new 5-star review verbatim each episode, and I credit the person who left it. You can make me say anything you want. And this week, that person is Penultimate J with a review entitled Positive Tabletop RPG News and Interviews. Penultimate J says, what I love about the podcast really has to do with James Introcaso. He keeps everything upbeat, and his enthusiasm for tabletop RPGs is evident. He interviews all kinds of people in the gaming scene, which is great to see. I'd consider Mr. Introcaso a kind of insider for D&D, but I think it's fantastic that he also uses the podcast to inform himself and his audience about games and gaming he has less experience with playing. He approaches each topic with humility, respect, and boundless positivity. That, I am getting choked up. Thank you very much, Penultimate J. You are the ultimate J to me. So thank you so much for this review. It means a lot, a ton. So thank you for that. People, you can follow me on Twitter at James Introcaso, and you can check out everything I'm doing in the world of game design over at worldbuilderblog.me. Tabletop Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network, thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by BattleBards. Remember that RPGs are like sex. Make sure you know everybody's name before you start to play. Hey everybody, James Introcaso. Just wanted to say one more thing about our sponsor for this episode, Kobold Press. Kobold Press is pretty amazing, and they create awesome third-party design products for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder, 13th Age, and all kinds of RPG systems. Their latest creation is Al-Qadim Genies. It is a PDF and print book available through the DM's Guild. What does it do? Well, it takes you deep into the desert world of Al-Qadim within the Forgotten Realms, and it gives you more than 20 new genies, including minor genies, huge sandstorm and oasis genies, and tasked genies. There's even a template for bottled genies. You can use this for your Forgotten Realms games, or you can use it for any homebrew campaign. It is incredible. Kobold Press always delivers quality every single time, and this product is no exception. You're going to want to go order it in print and PDF through the DM's Guild, because guess what? Wolfgang Bauer, the owner of Kobold Press, has a love for Al-Qadim. So there is no way that this is not made with love, the big secret ingredient in all Kobold Press products. Check it out. It is much lore and much more about those spirits in the lamp. You are going to love it. There's a direct link if you click on the Kobold Press banner on the Don't Split the Podcast website. It will take you directly to this product, or just go onto the DMs Guild and search for Alkadine Genies or Kobold Press.